Oh, all right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this panel on personalization. I have an exciting crew of gentlemen up here with me today to dive into the topic. I will do quick intros of them, starting with Scott Olechowski, who's Chief Product Officer and the co-founder at Plex, which combines free movies and TV with all your favorite streaming services to help you discover the next thing to watch across the full Mediaverse. Next, I have Otero, who's a technical director at Globant, which is a software development company that helps organizations reinvent themselves and unleash their potential. And then finally, Arash Pandari, who is the founder and creative director at Vion Labs, which aims to be the metadata backbone of the entertainment industry, using AI and machine learning tech to give media businesses better data. The goal today was really to define and to talk about how we define and deploy personalization. Let's see, I'm gonna start with some just topics, I guess. First up, just being platform mergers. So what we've seen a lot over the past couple of years is like companies combining. We've seen HBO Max and Discovery Plus combine to become Max. Just a couple of weeks back, we saw Hulu and Disney Plus come together in their first sort of iteration. So what does that mean to bring all of that content together, and how do you have to pivot your personalization strategy when you're looking at a much broader catalog? Can we start with Scott?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of in a little bit of a similar boat. One of our key missions in life is to connect people with entertainment, right? So we have what we call our Mediaverse and our Discover capabilities. So every movie and TV show you can find at watch.plex.tv. And so we've got universal search and universal discovery there, and you have a universal watch list. And it is tough, right? When you have an infinite, universe of content and you're trying to connect people with that, how do you do that? It's the same problem that you just described, right? You bring these two huge catalogs together, and now you need to help people navigate that and find it. So typically, we're looking for any signals we can find, right? And that's whether maybe they came via search, maybe we're looking at how they got there in the first place to give us some context. Maybe it's day parting, day of week and time of day parting to figure out, like, if you're coming in the morning, there's a set of things you might be looking for. When we have both AVOD and FAST, for example, and I can look at a graph that shows FAST cranks in the morning and then AVOD cranks in the evening when people want to sit down and pick a movie, whereas in the morning they're throwing on the news, they're throwing on something for the kids, it's a little bit more lean back. So we're looking for any signal we possibly can. And then as soon as they start clicking and digging around, we're using that as rapidly as you can as well. So that's my first take on that.
So maybe, Arash, as it relates to metadata, like you're bringing together a bunch of different types of content, like what's the strategy in creating some cohesion there?
I mean, curation and personalization have never been as important as now when it comes to these services, especially when you're merging several catalogs into one huge catalog. And obviously, one of the main reasons why people leave a service is because they can't find what to watch. And as of today, if you look at the start pages of different streaming services, they don't have a very, very clear strategy. And that's where I think like what Plex does very well and other ones is focusing quite a lot on trying to show me what I should watch on different services and guiding me through that universe. So the data and the foundational data behind what you use to do curation and personalization obviously have never also been as important as now. If you look at retail and you go into a shop, there's a clear strategy where you enter the shop, where the packages are, how the packaging looks, and what you actually can buy by the cash register when you go out. If you go into a streaming service today and you look at the start page, you barely can distinctively tell what each carousel by itself is representing. Is this carousel that says recommended for me, most popular, top list, etc., having a distinct niche or telling me what is inside of this carousel? Most likely not. Most likely it's a random set of different assets, and that feels for me today that we kind of grew a little bit too fast. We didn't have time to set our strategies for our own services to be able to guide our users through our shop that we have. Even though in e-commerce also as well, if you look at Amazon, same thing there. When you buy something, they recommend you something to attach to that purchase you did. So there's always a strategy when you move through the UI and the UX for a lot of services, while streaming kind of fell behind a little bit. And that's why I think aggregation and these type of services play a very big role. And metadata obviously being a big part of that.
Yeah, so we focus too much on personalizing recommendations at the sort of detriment of the fuller user experience.
To a certain level, I feel so. Like, if every single row and everything, like if you go into Netflix today, every row is personalized, right? And if you scroll away from it and come back, they actually change even the posters. So if I pass, say, the Pulp Fiction poster and I don't click it and engage with it, and I come back, and the first time I was on the poster was John Travolta on it. Then I scroll down the page and scroll back up. They actually changed the poster to maybe a poster with Uma Thurman. And when I click that poster, they actually pick up that signal, what I did, and they know, okay, Arash is more into clicking something that has a more colorful palette and has Uma Thurman as an actress. And that signal becomes something that they use continuously through my user experience. But sadly enough, it gives a very, very random experience when you have this, the shop changing mood all the time, and it shifts all the time.
Alex, anything to add?
Yeah. So, well, personalization is hard, right? It's a very hard thing to do well, and there's very few people in the industry, very few players that do that right. But it's never been easier, right? Today we have so many tools at our disposal. The tools have evolved so much. A couple of years ago, it was impossible for a small company to do personalization right. But today they can do it. They have the tools at their disposal. AI has helped us a lot. AI has been we've started applying AI on personalization since the very beginning. It's been the first application of AI on the media industry. But still, it's hard. Specifically on the large catalogs and media acquisitions, one thing we see a lot is, so the way we do personalization today is we try to build buckets and bubbles of content, and then we try to draw from those bubbles based on what the user based on what we infer the user would want, right? But when we merge these large catalogs, the long tail is huge, right? And there's such a huge amount of assets, and catalogs grow exponentially, right? And so we still use the same rules to personalize for different users. So, for example, a young person, a centennial that loves to watch whatever their friends are watching, is gonna get 80% from this bubble and then 20% from the long tail, right? But then a person who loves classics and loves old movies is still gonna get 80% from the main catalog, and then 20% from the long tail. And that's not the greatest experience for both of them, right? And so there's a lot of potential and improvement to get that better.
Okay, so let's stick with you, Alex, and talk a little bit about sports and live events. I would say, to me, this seems like one of the toughest challenges around personalization, because it's kind of playing out real time in front of you. So how can you what is the approach to personalization when you're looking at that sort of experience?
Yeah. That's a great question. So sports today is huge. It's driving the industry forward, right? Skyrocketing contracts. Everyone's trying to bringing sports into their streaming platform. Every player is interested in that. Whether that's great for the consumer or not, we can discuss. But everyone's trying to do sports. But there's so very little personalization today on sports. If you think about it, a die-hard sports fan that loves football is going to get exactly the same viewing experience that their grandmother that accidentally clicked on the NFL match, right? And that just does not make sense. We have so much data that we could feed into this into the first user. We can tell them, I don't know, we can build a heat map. We can tell them who's on the bench, whose statistics. And we could also tell a person that's new to the sport, we understand the user, we know who the user is. We could tell them, we could explain the rules. We have models that understand what's going on and can help the people engage with the content, right? We can use second screening to lead them to what we want, what would enhance and augment their experience, right? But we're not doing that. Today, viewing sports is pretty much viewing TV. We're not using interactive screens. We're not feeding the user with information. It's kind of an unobtrusive play that we give, and it's exactly the same for every user, and that's got a lot of potential for.
And you're just taking that same feed and basically putting it through the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe let's talk a bit about SVOD, AVOD, fast. You touched a bit on it, Scott, already. You guys also have a transactional business. And you talked a bit about sort of the opportunities to personalize all those different portions of the buy flow. So I guess when you're looking at these different platforms, can you talk a bit about some of the different behaviors you're seeing and the different decisions that people have to make and what opportunities that opens up for personalization?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, the first stop is, why is the user turning on the TV, right? And sometimes it's like, all right, I'm very direct. I know I'm looking for this movie. I'm gonna, search for it, or it's gonna be right there, and I'm ready to go. Or I'm gonna watch the next episode in a series that I'm doing, and it's a pretty simple, thing. Someone's already made a choice. Then there's the pure, I just need something on. I just want to catch up with the world. I just want to veg out and just have something come on. And we've, I think in a lot of cases made it hard. When I grew up millions of years ago, you turned on the TV and TV started playing. It was like pretty straightforward and wasn't real complicated. And now we've got this whole all right, you gotta go to work to get something playing. So I think there's trying to understand that mode is like the hardest problem, because it's like you don't have a lot of signals usually, but you can start to learn patterns. And so that, I think starting to see how people use the apps and start to do that to drive, okay, I'm not gonna force you to go through all this stuff. I know you just wanna get to your continue watching. Or I know it's 8 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, we're just gonna throw on the news or whatever it is. So I think that's step one. Step two is there's different types of users. There's some that will never rent a movie, right? They're just not gonna pay a dime. They're never gonna rent a movie. They're happy with the AVOD content or the fast content, and they're gonna dive in there. And we've seen really nice ways to kind of cross merchandise. You're watching this movie, you're watching the show Kung Fu on AVOD. Well, you're gonna love this whole dojo channel on fast or whatever, right? So it's nice to be able to kind of see that crossover, because that for us leads to much stickier users, right? If they're using multiple product lines, they're much more likely to come back, right? They found enough content to get them interested. So we're trying, and again, I firmly believe if you just look at the state of the art today, very often the person who's in the middle of Oklahoma, on a Wednesday morning coming in on an Android phone, mobile, is getting the same exact home screen as the person in Manhattan on an Apple TV on Saturday night, right? And they're probably looking for something completely different. So I think there's just this basic, help the user with all the context clues we have, all the patterns that we've seen from them in the past, to put the most relevant stuff in front of them. The other just kind of dirty fact is something like 70 or 80% of all the viewing comes from the home screen, right? So that's just the nature of this. So getting that right and using that real estate at the right times with the right audience is fundamentally the most important thing we can do.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, behavioral-wise, as far as I see it, when it comes, like Scott mentions, if you have an access of how lean forward versus lean backward you are when you're actually consuming content, and another axis being engagement, you have something like TVOD being very lean forward. You want to make sure you choose a perfect movie for that Friday night evening you have, that you only have 2 hours without the kids, and you want that to be perfect. Then you have those moments that is much more lean backward, and you just want something on, and you don't mind throwing up, Swedish Hollywood Wives or some other trash TV up there that you enjoy watching.
Is that a real show?
It's a real show in Sweden, and I love it. I'm not gonna deny it. That you just want the thing on trash television, as I call it, but still it has an audience, and I think that is important to understand what user experience you're adapting your recommendation and start page and so on for. We were talking just before the panel of the experiences of when some asset ends on an SVOD, on an AVOD versus a TVOD, when the end credit starts rolling. There's different ways of behaving towards the users to get them to keep engaging. Because when the end credits roll, you have a dead end, right? That's where they stop and they have to go back to the start page, and that's where you lose their attention. There's a huge risk. I think the numbers were from Netflix around 6 or 7 years ago. I saw an article that in their end credit recommendations, they had over 80% watching another asset if they recommended something to them to continue watching there. If they sent them back to the start page, over 75% of the users left the service because then they have to restart the whole behavior again. In an AVOD, you have this type of autoplay like Plex has, like you continue watching, and it's more like a linear behavior to it. In a TVOD, that's a very, very hard area to kind of get the users to stay. It's a hard threshold. They have to pay $4 or $5 to rent something, or a EST where you have to actually buy it for, say, $10 plus. So how do you react there when the dead end hits? And I think these are the user behaviors that you need to think of when it comes to these different services and different real estates that you have. So the start page, when the credits roll, and different views that you have.
And something like an AVOD service, you also need to ideally personalize your ad experience, I would say, as well, right? Like, you don't want someone seeing the same thing over and over. You don't want someone seeing ads that aren't relevant to them. So I guess, are there signals that you're looking at as you think about personalizing that?
I mean, I can just give a couple things. I mean, when we go out to them, all of our ads today are sold programmatically, right? So anyone can bid on them, and we're hooked up with a whole bunch of different folks out there. So we're passing along things like, as much as we can. There's some laws that make it difficult. Like, I shouldn't be passing the exact title, right? Because then people can start to put together a whole viewing history, and there's laws against that. So, but genre, mood is something that we've worked with. We're a customer of Vine Labs, just for the sake of full disclosure here. So we'll talk a little bit about why. But they have the ability to use their system, their AI engine, to analyze movies, to pull out moods. So you actually can get moods down to like what is that mood around that ad break. So we can pass that information up. Now, the market isn't necessarily ready to consume all that data yet, right? So some of the more advanced advertisers are looking at things like that. We're starting to see a little pickup and actually a little lift in CPMs as we do that. But it's still, I believe it's still pretty early days around that, but we're starting to put the infrastructure in place. We're starting to pass that data along with each ad request to do that. But we're also looking at other sponsorship type things that are going to be more and more personalized. We now, with the amount of traffic we generate, with people looking for different types of content, we have one of the most popular things on Plex right now is under our Discover stuff are trailers, right? People love to watch trailers. When you watch it, it pops a little add to watch list button. So now we're actually able to start to understand with the watch list, we get this kind of aspirational, what do people think they want to watch now? We've also learned that people add stuff to their watch lists that they think they want to watch and they never watch it. They end up watching trash TV. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon there, but it also gives us really interesting profiles about the user and the things they're interested in that we can then use to target both on and off platform using lookalike audiences and things like that to help people find that audience. So we're personalizing the ads. We're also personalizing based on these other signals all of the content.
Okay. So, did you have something you want to add?
Yeah, yep. I mean, I just wanted to add, we did a survey in the US with 3,500 users here, specifically around the advertisement experience. And one of the main reasons, obviously, being the content, why people churn from an AVOD service. But the second main reason was actually the ad experience. 2 repetitive ads that is just continuously having the same ad coming, or an ad popping up in the middle of a very suspenseful scene or in the middle of an important dialogue. Those reasons, I think, those parts of the user experience are also extremely important, right? You don't want to have a very sad scene running right now where it's almost like you get it all emotional and suddenly you have that diaper commercial coming up, screaming on the screen, or cat food commercial coming up. So I think the whole ad experience is an extreme big part of the actual user experience, and we have to take that in mind. And one of the things that we saw in the same survey was that moods and environments, actually, how if it was in a specific environment that matched that type of environment and mood that the content actually had. So it didn't shift.
The environment of that scene that you're watching.
Yeah, exactly. If it was in a big city and with nature on a beach that is warm, you want that kind of same feeling, color palette, and same mood of the whole scene that is coming up into it. That makes it more seamless for the users and just easier to digest that commercial without reaching for that remote control and turning off the audio and keeping their eyeballs on the screen. So I think that is part of the user experience we should prioritize and think about quite a lot as we do AWOD services. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the challenges in content discovery today that we're facing is the zero shot or few shot personalization. When we have a user that has not interacted a lot with our platform, how do we give them something that's valuable. And the way we're solving that right now is through curation, basically. You have a curator say, okay, these are the top movies, this is you designed the home experience that a user you don't know anything about will get, right? But we can do much better than that. That's how we've done it for a long time, and we have much better tools today at our disposal. So at Globant, one of the things we're experimenting with to solve this is by using Gen AI. It's an emerging capability that's not very much talked about, but LLMs are very good at recommending without that much context. Sorry. So LLMs are not designed for that, right? It's an emerging capability. We're testing how that works, but a few papers have come out on this, and the products that we've seen are incredibly solid. And it's yielding very, very positive results. I mean, we have to be careful as everything with LLMs. There's lots of biases. There's lots of things that we need to correct for. But the idea that we can tell the LLM as little as we know from this person, this person is from this place, zero-shot recommendation, right? So we know this person's where's geographically located, what has he done in the service before, as little clicks here and there. We can infer some demographics, but we can also say, okay, it's this day, this time of day, this time of week. For this region, that may mean something. These holidays are coming up. And with that information, we process that through an LLM. There are several techniques to make sure that all of our content is there and the recommendation will make sense. And the results that yielding are very, very impressive. It's something that today no one has done right, and it's a very interesting area of research.
So do I understand correctly then the way that we would have done that previously or currently would be more from like a machine learning approach where you're looking at behaviors and observing and making assumptions based on that. But what you're suggesting is that there's like a foundational LLM that has certain assumptions based into it that is doing some of that work for you.
Yeah,
is that right?
exactly. So if we think about it, how does that work, right? Why would an LLM be good at recommending to someone we don't know much about? So LLMs are trained on an entire corpus of data, like the entire data of the internet, right? Everything that we've ever written. In all of that content, there's all of the Rotten Tomatoes reviews and comments, all of the Reddit posts of someone saying, can you recommend, what do you think of this movie or that movie? All of the IMDb's, everything is trained onto the LLM, right? And so if we ask an LLM, can you recommend a movie for, or an asset or something for this user, we're basically using society, right? We're using the internet to draw from that, from all of the people that have reviewed and recommended and news and all of that. We're using that information, that power, and we're applying that to our catalog, to our users. So it's a massively powerful tool that we can use to basically put at our disposal of our users.
The LLMs, as far as, I mean, we have done a lot of experiments around it and played around with it. There's certain limitations to it, right? The LLMs, by the end of the day, are limited by what they can see on their internet. So there's local productions, they don't know the content and the context of the actual content itself. Then you have the second challenge of reconciliation. So being able to actually tell that this movie say a movie called The Soldier could be basically 10 different movies, right? And you have to be able to kind of bind those IDs or whatever and reconcile them and bind them together. So there's still quite a lot of limitations, and as it is quite text-based. And they're getting multimodal models out there where they can actually do much more. I still think that you need to teach the AI to understand how we humans perceive entertainment emotionally, how we perceive entertainment in general when it comes to what gets us to tick, what makes me entertained. And that's much more deeper than what a LLM can do today. But as far as I agree that LLMs actually, I think, on the long term could exchange more recommendation engines and what recommendation engines are doing today. But the foundational knowledge of what you feed the LLM needs to be fine-tuned, and you can't have these general LLMs doing everything. So you need to actually teach the LLM specifically what is entertainment, media, and videos that we consume today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have a music-focused product called Plex, and in there we've done some fun experiments where you can say, hey, make me a playlist while I'm sitting in, a panel, at NAB in Vegas, today, and it'll go out and it'll come back with a playlist, and it's striking sometimes how good it can be at finding some interesting stuff. It's also sometimes confusing and terrible. So I think we're still in that kind of early days on how to connect these dots, but it is a powerful tool that's using different connections in the data to help us, that the machine learning stuff just, it can't necessarily take all that into account. So I think there's some exciting opportunities there.
So something like Plex, are you building your own large language
No,
model
in
to
this
power
case,
that,
we're
or-
literally just using ChatGPT and then mapping it back to the Tidal music service that we offer. So and that wasn't our own LLM. It's just using the generic stuff. But that's for music is actually, I think, a simpler problem because there's a lot of information on the internet, and it's like a little, there's enough data out there to make it useful.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what you both said. There's many technical limitations today that we're working.
Those are
through,
going to be solved.
but they're going to be solved.
Definitely.
If we look into the future, 2 years, 3 years, not distant future, in the next couple of years, LLMs are going to get better. They're going to have the input that they accept is going to be a lot bigger, which is a current very hard technical limitation that we have. But if we plan for the future, we can envision a recommendation system where we have an anonymized profile of everything that the user has done, every interaction that it has had with any of our products. And I'm not meaning just media products, right? Every major player in the industry today has a suite of products and a user interacts with the company through many of that product. And today we're not using that to personalize that experience. Maybe we know that this user through the e-commerce platform, but all of these things, can we use that to personalize their video experience? And specifically with LLMs, we can envision a future where we just describe text-based description of everything that we know about that user, everything the user has done. We anonymize that. We feed that into an LLM, and then that could produce the quality of recommendations that could produce is huge. It would be an inflection point for the recommendation itself. We're still not there, but if we look into the future, that is a very, very interesting area.
Basically, if you're a company right now who's playing in the personalization space or has a product that you want to be personalized, you should be thinking about that data stack, I guess, right? And how you are getting a full picture of all the different touch points on it. So let's move into the data conversation. And prepping for this, we talked a little bit about there not being enough data, but then we're also talking here, like sometimes there's too much data and you don't really know how to make sense of it and where it's coming from. So I guess, what are the challenges as it relates to data that you face?
I mean, for us, it's the cold start problem is a big one, right? And then the second is, what are the most important signals? So one of the things that we've been focused on is social signals for, if you step back, there were some studies done, it's pretty obvious. I think everyone would nod their head and say, where do we find what to watch, right? We find it from friends and family, and people are like, hey man, you got to check this out, or you got to check this out, and you make yourself a note, or you send yourself an email, or whatever you do to keep track of that. So we introduced the Discover Together service, so you can follow people that you know, friends, people that you trust, family members, and it'll automatically kind of, if you allow it, share your watch history, if you've added something to your watch list, if you've recommended it to another person, or if you've rated something, right? So those are incredibly strong signals. People that you know that are active on the platform. You can, on Plex, you can mark any movie or any show, whether you watched it in a theater, if you watched it on Netflix, you watched it in Plex, it'll, that activity will go there. So now we're building up this profile that's obviously your history, but now it's history of people you know and trust. So now every week or every day I get to see what's trending with my friends, and that's how I'm discovering content, because now not only do I trust these people are watching good stuff, but I now know I can socialize with them about it too, which is like another little deeper human component of this. So for us, that's an area that we're trying to develop because we think those signals are some of the most powerful signals, but I think that's what everyone's struggling with, right? Is like, what are the signals that really matter? And how do you feed those into the system? That's problem one.
So what signals matter to the two of you? Alex?
Yeah. So it's like I said, it's getting personalization right is really hard. Identifying which signals and specifically the weight of every signal is a really, really hard job.
And it's different person by person, right? So that's one of the other thing we're learning is that you might have this kind of profile, reactions, recommendations, and I might be very different. The signals that matter to me might be completely different, right? So we're starting to understand the personalization needs to be personalized.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think about how big of a deal is this, right? Because not only on the trying to monetize the user, but also what does it mean for a user that we recommend things right? How big of a deal is if we miss it, right? And the answer is it's a huge deal because you just said the word trust, and the word trust is fundamental in the recommendation model. If we build trust with the user, then every recommendation that we do will be looked at with different eyes. If we fail the first recommendations on the cold start due to the cold start problem or few shots, we don't know that much about the user, and we fail, the trust gets thrown away. It's really hard to recover from that, and I'm sure everyone sees that. I know that some streaming services are really good at giving me recommendation. I trust them a lot more than other streaming services that they've broken my trust as a user. So the importance of accurate and quality recommendations is paramount to building a relationship with the user that you can leverage.
I mean, there's one service out there I know that doesn't have much of a problem with cold start, and that is TikTok. Very few people open the TikTok app and actually have a problem leaving it almost, right? And that's because they're very good at picking up micro signals. Like as soon as you start swiping there, you're starting to consume as soon as you open the app. As soon as I'm watching 5 videos with people dancing versus 5 people playing basketball or whatever it is, they are picking up those micro signals of how many seconds am I consuming what. And one of the things I've been thinking about quite a lot when it comes to streaming services is that when we turn on our streaming services, you have to do a couple of clicks before we actually get something on, right? Or start a trailer or whatever it is. So there's this discussion we're having internally about always on mode. That as soon as you open a streaming app, you actually have something playing, giving you a signal. So as soon as I open a streaming app and I'm seeing at the top banners playing a big, emotional, inspiring underdog movie there, like Remember the Titans about American football. And I watch that clip, and then I skip the next clip that is about action movies. And then I watch the third clip again that is about American football. Within the first session, I'm already giving you clear signals that I like underdog stories about American football. So to pick up those micro signals through the browsing, instead of waiting for me to watch a 2-hour movie that is about American football, you can actually pick up those signals quickly within the first session. But that also demands that you can pick up in real time and adapt the start page in real time to give me those recommendations that I need and change the carousels quite quickly. So there's a lot of micro signals in our user behavior as we go through the services. So I think this has been a little bit underestimated in our user experiences that we see out there today that can definitely be improved and done much better. Everywhere from, like I mentioned, the thumbnails from Netflix to playing, videos as soon as I start a service, instead of having me click 3-4 times before I actually do an interaction that is meaningful.
Yeah, so what's preventing services from doing that? Is it like a computing power, or people not trained to look at that sort of fine of a signal? Like, what is the challenge there?
I would argue one of the challenges is these are long form content, right? So a lot of times people are making a 2-hour decision, an hour and a half decision when they're doing it, and there's like kind of this trained behavior of us, working out our thumb to go around. But I agree, we are not good at using real-time signals as an industry in general today. Because what are the signals, right? If you're not really watching it, so you might see something, but you're like, I don't know if I want to, Netflix has done a pretty good job with the clips, the previews and stuff like that, and I think it's working. But I do think, it's a different type of decision than TikTok, right? TikTok, like if you screw up, you screwed up 60 seconds, or whatever, 30 seconds. Like it's not a huge decision. But I think, for a movie or, sitting down for a couple hours, again, the mode that you're in, I think drives a lot of that, right? So if you're in all right, I'm going to sit down with my family or with my wife or whatever and try to figure out something to watch for 2 hours in our most valuable Friday night time, that's just a very different decision than Wednesday morning, I need something on while I'm making breakfast or whatever. So.
Yeah. So I want to touch too on mood. I feel like mood came up a couple of times, and maybe just as you're thinking about personalization, how are you measuring mood, and like what are some of the challenges or like watch outs around that?
So we started training AI to understand emotions around 6 years ago, and it was quite complicated. First of all, how we experience things emotionally differs from region to region. So what we did is that we had a bunch of people sitting down watching 5-second clips. And the reason we chose 5-second clips is because they only have the opportunity to feel one emotion, and used a psychological model called valence, arousal, and dominance. Valence standing for positive and negative emotions, arousal is stress levels, and dominance is how much you feel in control when you're watching something. With those 3 dimensions, you can actually map up the 8 basic human emotions: joy, sadness, anger, etc. So after we have labeled hundreds of thousands of clips, the AI starts picking up signals that, okay, fast clips with fast music makes people stressed, or colorful scenes with very happy music makes people joyful. And teaching that to the AI was crucial for us to being able to get that to determine what is the mood of the actual scene, what is the mood of the actual content. And it's not like a specific scene can only have one mood, right? It can shift quite a lot. So you need to understand that how it changes over time. Stress levels is nothing you want as an average for content. You want to know how stress levels evolve over time. So teaching the AI what mood is when it comes to entertainment was quite complex, actually. And we had to source that from several different regions. So it was both like people from North America, the Middle East, Asia, and the Nordics. And we learned quite quickly that everybody experiences things a little bit differently from each other. And that became the foundational model of how we can use moods for both recommendations and advertisement and other stuff.
Yeah, and so we're using this, we're running our entire AVOD catalog through the Viant Labs system, getting all of this data, right? They pull out keywords, they pull out genres, and the mood stuff. And the mood stuff has proven to be the most interesting with all the experiments we've done, to the point where now we're actually looking at offering moods as a drill down in the app, right? To be able to, hey, what kind of mood are you in? Let the user decide and tell us, and then go in, and then here's all the content that kind of maps to that. So far, the mood stuff has shown the biggest lift.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Yeah, so sentiment analysis has gone a long way. In the last few years, the breakthroughs have been enormous, and we're doing sentiment analysis today on long videos and extracting metadata from that. But the potential also is when we combine that with semantic search. And we can search through moods, and we can search through, say, movie plots. And that's something that no player today is really using. It's a big investment. But if you could go through to your OTT service and say, can you give me a movie, an action movie with trains, right? And we can do a sentiment analysis on the movies, extract that, and then match semantically that with your query, right? With your prompt. You can also say, I would want the movie, I don't know, where Tom Cruise is a samurai, right? What was the movie? I can't remember. And a model would be able to pick that, run that against your catalog, and pick out the movies that you might want, and also add a recommendation layer on top of that. When we combine those two things, the features that we can enable for our users are huge, and that's not being taken advantage too much. It's an interesting question whether we want that, whether we would want a user to go in on the prompt and start. I mean, users are not prompt engineers, right? They just want to watch content. But if we could enable that feature, that could be very valuable if we can teach them how to do it. And yeah.
I think mood is a quite interesting way of, I mean, we always get this analysis paralysis when we have to choose on too many categories. What are we going to watch tonight? Honey, you want that, what type of movie do you want? It's always easier going out from like, what mood are you in? What mood do you want to be in, right? I want to feel happy tonight, so I want to cry. So give me an emotional tearjerker, or give me...
Dude, you can cry right now. It's cool.
Sometimes you want. No,
that's kind of how you talk about, like when you're, especially if you're like married or sitting with a partner or a friend, you are talking about like not necessarily I want to watch like Tom Cruise tonight, but I want to watch something. You're sort of navigating that a little bit, right?
Exactly.
Of what is that common ground?
And that common ground comes like if you watch something you really like, you kind of chase that mood again, right? You want to go back to that emotion that you felt when you watched that. And that's what we have learned, like a category like emotionally inspiring can be something that goes everywhere from biography war movies to movies about musicians to underdog sports movies. All of them make you feel a little bit the same way. So I think it's more about, it's easier to choose a mood than specifically say, tonight I want to watch movies about shark attacks. That was a weird choice.
Yeah, the way that we did this in my household is we divided them into martini movies and gummy movies, which you can do in certain states. But that kind of gives you the idea of, do I want something that's kind of
Can I steal
just
that for
silly?
Plex?
Absolutely, go for it. Yeah, I do take a small commission.
Okay.
So the last question I'll ask before we throw it to the audience is just, like, some of this is sensitive, right? Like you're mapping mood, you're monitoring mood, that piece of it in particular. I think consumers are getting a lot savvier about how their data is being tracked, and companies are doing a lot more work to make that transparent up front. So like, how are you kind of navigating the bigger picture sort of regulatory space around all this?
I mean, we're obviously, everything we're doing is, within all of the privacy frameworks of the countries that we operate in. We operate essentially globally, right? So we're constantly, and it's amazing. Some of you probably know, but it's gotten really complicated. So that's a big part of it, is just making sure we understand all that and then follow those guidelines. What we're finding is if we give the user an idea why we're recommending something, it helps take away some of that. Because you watched this, because that movie was this mood, because you haven't seen something like this in a while. If we can start to show more of that, then it takes away some of the like, what, why, what are they doing? So we're starting to figure out how to do that, because it starts to get kind of wordy on a home screen too, right? How do you do it? But we are starting to, and you've seen it with, I've seen it with some of the ads that you see, like, why am I showing you this ad, right? This kind of concept of, helping the user understand a little bit what's behind the curtain, I think is part of developing that trust.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And we're going into a cookie-less world, right? Whether that's better or worse for user experience, we can talk about that, but it's coming. Regulations are always catching up, and they're always behind us, but they're moving forward. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to plan that. And in the future, the ideal scenario would be we can give the power back to the user, right? The user is in control of their data, and the user may choose to give us their data, but that's an opt-in. I would very gladly give out as much data as I possibly can to an OTT streaming service, because I know that first of all, we have trust, but I know that they're going to use that data and not try to sell me stuff, but try to actually recommend relevant content, give me the best experience that they can. And so if we can we will find a way to have the users control their own data and decide what they want to share, when they want to share, and we can act based on that.
Yeah, Arash?
I think there's 2 points to that. So one of them being that I am most likely more willing to share data about my consumption if I can see that it actually affects my user experience. So I stopped giving thumbs up and down on YouTube, as I have noticed it doesn't affect the feed the way I want it to be affected. So after 10 times I put a thumbs down on a channel or type of content I don't want, if it doesn't stop giving me that, I'm just going to stop giving them those signals. But it's also very clear that I'm way more willing to share information about that I'm interested in gaming or I'm interested in movies, trailers, or whatever it is on YouTube, than rather sharing who I am, what my age is, where I'm from. So what we consume within entertainment, I think we're much more willing to share. So that becomes much more important to actually understand the context of what people are consuming versus understanding who they are. Then there's the part of that demographic-wise, we have changed quite a lot ever since streaming services and internet started being so global. So an example is that anime from Asia has started becoming extremely popular in the Nordics for people above the age of 40. And that wasn't common before. So I think there's a lot of kind of like importance to pick up of what I actually consume, but also to give me that effect that I can see if I share data and I tell you that I like this, but I don't like this, that it affects my user experience now, not my user experience in a week or 2 weeks, or have a huge delay or latency behind that. So yeah, I think that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We have a couple minutes for questions if anyone has them. We have one up here on the front.
Yeah, I've got a 2-part question. In terms of onboarding new users to any kind of streaming service, we want it to always be frictionless. In terms of like shows that you might recommend to them as soon as they sign up, do you think it's appropriate, for example, to ask leading questions during the registration process, or like pick your favorite shows? So that would be just one question. And then the other question, I was really interested in what you were saying at the beginning about what Netflix is doing with changing sort of posters. How important do you guys, any of you, think A/B testing is within the process of recommendations?
So to repeat for everyone if they didn't hear, the first one was about onboarding and that sort of cold start moment. What's appropriate? Do you ask leading questions? And the second is about personalizing assets and the importance of A/B testing as it relates to figuring out what is right. You want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, A/B testing is crucial. Like, you should never assume that whatever you're going to change or do is going to just be because the behavior that you have or people around you. So I think whatever changes you do, you should do it properly and with a lot of A/B testing behind it and be very data-driven. I think the part of like, if you want me during the registration to share information with you, like I say, there's got to be a win behind that I feel is effective. So as of now, I've seen a lot of services out there asking me what is my favorite genre. But if I tell you I like comedy, comedy can go everywhere from Woody Allen to Jim Carrey, right? So it can be extremely wide. So you have to really get those questions really correctly and also give an incentive, I believe, that is valuable enough for me that as soon as I registered and I did those answer the questions you had, I was like, whoa, the start page actually is appealing to me now. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen, again, the onboarding is an interesting question because how someone gets to onboarding matters, right? So a lot of our traffic comes from search, right, on a platform. If someone's looking for a movie, they find it on Plex, they go in, they want nothing to stop them, right? We used to require registration for our free stuff, and we literally doubled traffic just by getting rid of registration. Now, we're finding ways to work it back in, and now we've gotten registration rates up, and we're doing well there. But you can't, I think you always need, like, depending on the service. The free stuff, I think, is a little different, right? Obviously, if it's a SVOD service, completely different. But there is this, like, give people a little escape valve, right? So if you're gonna start asking questions, you need to be able to skip that. You need to be able to get out of it. And I think the key then is finding ways to reintroduce those questions later in the experience, right? It doesn't all have to be one shot up front and then you never see it again. I think, being able to bring that back in and ask it when you need more signal from somebody is, a powerful opportunity. On the A/B testing, it's probably the most important thing we've done as a company is build testing into the fabric of all of our apps, of all of our front end and back end services. We have it all tied into a system where we can run multiple experiments and do all sorts of different stuff, and it's completely unlocked our ability to understand and to optimize. And I'm happy with the team only having 20 or 30% of the experiments actually lead to a positive result. It's more about the creativity around the experiments and trying new things and doing stuff. And now I'm at the point where going forward, I want the machine to come up with the experiments. I don't want, I mean, some of them will obviously have to build, but over time, that home screen, I think, is going to be a machine-driven, AI-driven, home screen, right? That it's, optimizing for, again, I'm coming in from the middle of the country at 8 a.m. on a mobile device versus Friday night, in, one of the more expensive zip codes in the country, at 8 o'clock, right? So I think there's a bunch of opportunity there. And I also firmly believe that the context matters, right? When I see movie A next to movie B versus movie C, I think that actually drives people, one way or another. And there's this kind of thing, and no one is really understanding the implications of like how the whole presentation of a home screen actually changes the way someone views the service and views what to watch. So I think there's a bunch of work that needs to be done on that.
Yeah, to your first question, I think the answer is no. Anything that can be inferred from the user should not be demanded actively from the user. We can do better than ask the user for their preferences. We need to infer them, we need to learn them, or we need to build it into the aftermath, right? When a user gets into our apps, we have seconds to show them true, relevant, valuable content. If we make that experience, if we build friction into our experience, we lose the user. So,
Any others?
So using AI and LLM, you're able to look at a lot of historical information, but what about stuff that's more relevant to the time of today? As an example, Academy Awards nominations just come out, and you've got film titles that are not known by the general public, but they see a movie that's nominated, and the actors and directors that are then surrounding that particular title. How are you able to capture that information in your recommendation page, for example?
So the question is, if you have a large language model that you're using to provide recommendations, you've trained that on some foundational data, how are you continuing to feed that with new and relevant information based on the news cycle?
I'll take that. So there are several techniques. In order to make an LLM be good at recommending, you need to fine tune. And when you fine tune, you can build in a lot of the relevant catalogs that you have. And then the other is, there's a technique called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. And so when a user wants something, we find the movies that are semantically relevant, and we feed that to the LLM along with the prompt. So basically, the user does not see that, but every time we go to the LLM, we feed a lot of context, and we feed all of the new movies, anything that we find is relevant, and we let the LLM decide if it wants to put that into the recommendations.
I think the key there is you're not using a generic LLM for this. You can't, right? You need to be customizing it for the use case and giving it access to the context, the relevant current information in your example, I think is kind of the key, which is what I think has slowed things down a little bit because all this stuff is still kind of new, and figuring out the best, most efficient way to do that is still hard, right? I mean, there's lots of techniques and lots of different ways, but you can probably find 1,000 different ways to do that today, and people are struggling with what's the most scalable, what's the most useful. So I think that's going to shake out here in the next couple quarters, is my sense, and you'll solve that problem almost out of the box in a couple cases.
So I'll do the last question here. I think you had one.
Yeah, given everything we talked about in the last hour or so, what kind of thought have you had around groups of users? We've talked a lot about personalization to a single user, group consumption of content, friends groups, the social graph. That's the topic, though.
Yeah, so we actually have all the pieces coming together for that, because we see a world where that's exciting, right? We got the social pieces, so you can hook up with your friends, you can start to figure out what they're interested in and start to actually make some kind of combined recommendations to people, right? Which is, the use case there is my family or my wife and I sitting down. How do you solve for that? Because you got two different independent, sets of things. So we're working on trying to put the foundation together to collect enough data to do that. So that's one. And two, we have a watch together feature already built into the platform, right? So I can bring essentially an infinite number of people watching a stream together that you choose, and you can watch within sub-second sync. The content, will play out on Plex. So we're trying to figure out how does that, the challenge becomes, when you have something like AVOD, your ad break, we may come at the same time, but mine might be 2 minutes and yours might be 1.5 minutes because the ad didn't fill or whatever the reason is. So AVOD's a little bit tricky. Fast is not. Fast is pretty straightforward. We all have the same length of ad breaks. TVOD, rental stuff, there's no ads, so there's no problem there. So we're trying to figure out like how do we connect those dots. I'm excited about it because I think we've taken some of the social out of entertainment consumption, and our mission over time is to bring that back. And I think it's, there's a bunch of technical issues, and then there's just a bunch of like UX and how do you bring it together. But we're kind of intent on solving that over time.
I think the social part has been quite underestimated for a while. The last 3 shows I watched has been through social recommendations and through the Plex feed that I have. And I do believe when you're watching things together, it's definitely easier to use a mood as the foundation than rather trying to figure out what taste do we all have together, what theme do we want on the movie, is it superheroes or is it, whatever we want to watch, but instead of saying how we want to feel. That is always easier when you're sitting a group of people. Yeah, we want to laugh tonight, right? We want to have fun. Or we're sitting together, we want maybe something romantic when we're sitting with our partner, or something scary, so we can get close and hug. I don't know why I said that. But you get it. The different situations when it comes, it's always using the mood as the foundation is always easier in a group that I believe, but yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys so much. Thank you for the rest of your show.